doing? You know, this is not television. I'll hear you if you reply. How you doing? That's more like it. Well, I just want to get a sense of who's here tonight, so by applause. No, bring those down, please. Seriously, bring those down. Nobody in the room even did that. All right, well, we'll move on. By applause, how many people here tonight were on last year's cruise? Once again, by applause, how many people here tonight were not on last year's cruise? Awesome. First-timers were welcome. And finally, by applause, how many people who were on last year's cruise are not here tonight? Just the drunk guy. Everybody else made it back. Awesome. Well, for those of you who were here last year, doesn't it seem like we just did this? Oh my God, time flies, and I swear the older you get, the faster it goes. You know, it feels to me like it was maybe 4 years ago I was thinking, oh my God, I'm turning 40. This year, I'm going to turn 55. You know what that means? It means Denny's thinks I'm a senior citizen now. I can get a Grand Slam breakfast for a lot cheaper than you whippersnappers. I have already started getting brochures from senior retirement communities. How many people think I belong in a senior retirement community? You do? Well, that makes me feel awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I want to live somewhere where if I want to visit a buddy who lives 2 blocks away, I can take a golf cart. That's what I'm doing. I got to tell you, I don't feel 55, but I got to be honest. I don't care if you have a perfect diet, a perfect exercise program, and you feel like you're in your 20s, you are not in your 20s. You know who will let you know that? People in their 20s. Young people have started insulting me lately by calling me names. Things like Mr. and Sir. And they're not fooling me. That's young person code for boring old fart. Because I remember being their age and looking at people my age, like my mom and dad, thinking things like, oh, look at them hug. God, I hope they don't still have sex. Well, why would they even want to? I mean, look at them. You're talking love handles, hairlines up to here, hair's coming out the ears. Well, and dad's no bargain either, gee. You become a young adult, you watch every change your parents go through, it scares the heck out of you. Why? Because a lot of it's genetic and you know it, that's why. I remember when my dad turned 60, his butt disappeared. I mean, he went to bed with a big butt, woke up with no butt whatsoever. It's like the tooth fairy came by in kind of a cranky mood. I saw stuff like that, got so scared, I started striking deals with God. Like, okay, I can see you're going to take the hair off the head. I don't like it. I can live with it. Just please don't let me get my dad's eyebrows. You know where the hairs grow out and point to the sun? Because every October we check the thickness of my dad's eyebrows, then we know how severe winter it's going to be. Shows up looking like a hedgehog, you buy a better coat. You don't mess around. My parents tried to stay in shape too, God bless them, they tried. I remember when they went out and bought a $1,200 exercycle. And even then I knew it was a bad idea. I was like, come on guys, save your money, you're never going to use this thing. Glad to say I was wrong about that. Every night, as soon as my dad got home from work, he would drape his coat on it. Congratulations, Dad, good investment. You bought a $1,200 coat hanger. We should build a whole gym in here and just turn it into a walk-in closet. I know I'm not a youngster anymore, but I tell you, it helps to be married to a good woman because Shariva's a lot younger than I am and a lot better looking, but she likes to build up my ego by saying things like, honey, you're a good-looking man for your age. Well, thanks, darling. That was just 3 words longer than a compliment. I want an honest opinion. I don't talk to Shariva. I talk to my girls. They don't hold back. When my younger daughter, Sarah, was a toddler, I was trying to explain to her a little bit about genetics. I was saying, so you get traits from your parents, honey. You mostly have your mom's face. You have your mom's ears. You have your mom's lips. You have your mom's eyes. But you got my hair. She looks at me for a second and says, younger daughter, Alana, loves to draw, has decided she will be an artist when she grows up. And according to her, this is what I look like. Which didn't really bother me, until she drew a picture of her mother. I got the whole family portrait here. So I know I'm not a youngster, and I gotta be honest, I don't care. Because when I look at what young people are into these days, my first thought is, thank God I'm old. Like, what is with young people and all the piercing? Is this supposed to be attractive? I saw a kid the other day had so many holes punched in him, you could blow in his ear and play him like a flute. Which would probably scare him. He's never heard music with a melody before. It's like these kids you see that get up on the cruise ships and karaoke night and do rap songs. It's like, congratulations, Junior, you just proved you can read. Out loud and everything. And I don't know, maybe that is an accomplishment these days, given the way the schools are. I don't know what some kids are learning. Like, if I'm having a bad day and I want to take it out on a teenager, I just go by McDonald's for lunch. Kid behind the counter says, that'll be $4.32. I give him $5, let him ring it in, then I give him the 2 pennies. Just to watch him go, well, math skills aren't what they used to be. Congress keeps debating the minimum wage. I say, hell, just tell them they got a raise. How would they know the difference? Piercing is so popular, we now have a piercing parlor in our local mall. With a sign in the window, I kid you not, it says, ears pierced while you wait. I'm thinking, what other option is there exactly? Do kids drop them off at other stores? Yeah, piercings, will you, buddy? I'll pick them up in an hour. Sorry I'm walking so slow, they got my feet at the shoe store over there. I'm shopping for a jock strap, I'm a little scared, I'll be honest. And we had stupid fashions when I was growing up too. The thing is, we had the good sense not to make them permanent. See, like, I'll admit it, when I was young, I wore purple, bell-bottom, hip huggers. You'll notice, I didn't have them bolted to my legs. When I came to my senses, I could just take them off. Kids today haven't figured that out. Every other teenage girl I see now has a tattoo right here. I'm thinking, fine, you're 16, you're getting away with it. You know, you could live to be 90. You want some nursing home orderly changing your diaper someday and seeing Hottie written back there? I don't think so. So I'm happy not to be a youngster, but of course, I do want to enjoy my middle age. I want to be energetic and healthy as long as I can, and isn't that why we do what we do? Isn't that why we come on cruises, to learn from these fantastic speakers? Well, with that in mind, let's introduce our speakers and make fun of them, shall we? First speaker I want to introduce this week, the author of Practical Paleo. It's Diane Sanfilippo. Give it up for her, make her feel welcome. Diane was a very athletic young lady growing up. She was captain of the golf team, captain of the gymnastics team, and in fact, because of her unusual combination of strength and agility and balance, she spent some years, and I'm not making this up, performing in the circus. And she sent me a picture from those days. Well, later Diane went away to college, and unfortunately she did what college students do. She started eating junk food, she put on a lot of weight. She's completely honest about that. She has a picture of herself from her website, and I'm not joking, that is her. It's just hard to believe she's the same person. But she got tired of being overweight, so she tried the standard advice, the low-fat diet, eat your grains. That didn't work out very well, so she eventually kept researching, experimenting, until she developed what she now calls the Balanced Bites program. This is a very effective and truly unique method for losing weight. Let me explain how it works. You can eat anything you want, as long as you're in a precarious position that requires exceptional balance. As soon as you hit the ground, you stop eating. This method has turned out to be so exhausting and so frustrating, Jillian Michaels wants to adopt it for The Biggest Loser. Well, of course, Balanced Bites is actually about a very balanced paleo diet, which is how Diane went from this to the lovely woman she is today. That's Diane Sanfilippo. Give it up for her. Another speaker I'm glad I'm finally meeting in person this week. It's Dr. Jay Wortman. How about a hand for Dr. Wortman? Dr. Wortman has a really interesting personal history. His mother came from a First Nations tribe in Canada, what we would call Native Americans in the U.S. And in the course of his medical practice, he discovered that type 2 diabetes is very common among First Nations people, and then in his 40s, found out he had developed type 2 diabetes himself. So he stopped eating carbohydrates immediately just to keep his blood sugar down, and then discovered, surprise, he started losing weight and getting healthier. So he did some research. He talked to older members of the tribe. He found out that the original diet of the First Nations people was like an Atkins diet or a paleo diet. It was a lot of meat, a lot of fish, a lot of fat, but no sugar, no grains, no carbohydrates. And because of that, he eventually became the driving force behind a terrific documentary. If you haven't seen this, I suggest you get a copy. It's called My Big Fat Diet. Have you seen this? Very compelling documentary. In it, a group of native people from Canada try as much as they can to return to their native diet. A lot of meat, a lot of fish, a lot of fat, but no sugar, no grains, no carbohydrates. People who were obese and diabetic started losing all this weight and getting healthier. So of course, we hear from people from Health Canada saying, yes, they're losing weight and getting healthier, but we think this diet's going to kill them. Anyway, as usual. It was because of this documentary that I was familiar with Dr. Wortman. Now, I didn't have any pictures of Dr. Wortman when I started this process, so I went looking on Google Images. And you know what? It's amazing what you get on Google Images if you type someone's name. For example, you type my name, you'll get this, and this, then you'll get this. Sharita loves having me associated with that. You get this, and this. So I typed in Dr. Jay Wortman. First I got this. Excellent. Then I got this. Okay, he's a pretty smart guy. It kind of works. I got this. Well, he does have a First Nations background. Kind of works. My favorite one was this. And I thought, well, that's obviously been photoshopped, so I kept looking. Then I found the original. Which I think just shows what a high-fat diet can do for you. Well, we're delighted Dr. Wortman is with us this week, and I gotta be honest, it's a bit of a miracle that he is. Because based on what I've learned about him, I'm not only surprised he's here, I'm surprised he's alive. So let's have some audience participation at this moment and see if you can guess why Dr. Jay Wortman ought to be deceased. Here are your choices. A, didn't notice a hairpin turn while driving way too fast and wrapped his Porsche around a tree. B, didn't notice a car while driving his motorcycle way too fast and spent 3 days in a coma. C, didn't notice the ground while hang gliding off a high mountain and broke it into a dozen pieces. I knew there was a sound in there somewhere. All right, those are your choices by applause. How many think it's A? How many think it's B? How many think it's C? The correct answer is... Now, if you somehow survive all this, there are a couple of ways you can interpret that. The smart side of your personality could kick in, and you could say, wow, I better slow it down before my luck runs out. Or the not-so-smart side of your personality could kick in, and you could say, well, obviously I'm immortal. I may as well spend all my weekends skiing down really steep mountains. What could possibly go wrong? which is what Dr. Wortman does. So imagine my surprise when I sent him this question, and I got back this answer. So let's review, shall we? We have a doctor with a history of crashing into things he didn't notice, whose biggest fear is being decapitated, and who responds to this by spending his weekends doing an Evel Knievel impression with sports cars, motorcycles, hang gliders, and skis. I, for one, am looking forward to Dr. Wortman's next documentary. Yes, it's the inspiring story of how a First Nations doctor overcomes type 2 decapitation by switching to a high-fat paleo diet and growing a new brain. That's Dr. Jay Wortman. Give it up for him. Our next speaker this week is someone most of you know best as the Bulletproof Executive. It's Dave Asprey. Give him a hand. Dave is one of these super dynamic individuals who does more in 1 year than most of us do in an entire lifetime. I mean, this guy has developed computer technology, started several high-tech companies, traveled the world, climbed mountains, meditated with Buddhist monks in Tibet. He's written books on business and technology. He's written books on diet and health. So, with all this on his resume, what made him a rock star to the people in our community? He puts butter in his coffee. We saw this, we were like, oh my God, that man's a genius. Well, given everything he's accomplished in life, I asked Dave, so what's the quick description for you? I mean, what do you tell people you do? He said, I just tell people I'm a biohacker. I said, well, that's cool. But after what happened last year, I think you should choose a different label. In his quest as a biohacker, Dave has experimented with all kinds of diets and supplements and exercises and mental techniques and sleep patterns. And because of this, he has been able to not only lose 100 pounds while gaining muscle, he also was able to raise his IQ by more than 20 points. And I was all ready to jump on board with that until I read part of his protocol for raising your IQ. I saw that, I called some ex-girlfriends and thanked them for turning me into the smart guy I am today. Hey, it's Tom Naughton, remember me? Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for boosting my IQ by 20 points. Yeah, I'm serious. You're probably the reason I'm not a nutritionist. Anyway, I was fascinated by this whole theory about becoming smarter by avoiding sex, so I asked Dave Asprey about that when I had him on my podcast show.
Welcome back to the
Fathead
Show with
Tom Naughton. And my guest today is Dave Asprey, who some of you probably know better as the Bulletproof Executive. Dave, welcome to the show.
I'm excited to be here today.
I'm really happy you could join us here today, and the main reason I wanted to bring you on the show was to talk about this rather interesting claim you've made that you were able to raise your IQ and achieve a new level of mental clarity and, well, basically become some sort of Superman by going without sex for a long time. How would you feel about discussing that?
Oh my God, my prefrontal cortex just turned on. I feel so good.
Okay, great. Well, why don't you start by telling us why you even felt a need to try this, let's admit it, rather unusual method of improving yourself.
I noticed that my brain wasn't working very well. I would forget stuff, and I couldn't stay awake in meetings to save my life. And it was the mental stuff that really got to me. I said, God, I'm a smart guy, but all of a sudden I don't feel smart anymore.
But giving up sex for an extended period is a pretty radical step. Did you try any of the more common methods for improving your focus?
I've fasted with shamans in caves. I've done 10-day Buddhist meditation retreats in Nepal.
Well, if those didn't work, I understand why you'd want to try something different. But I'm curious how your wife reacted when you said, honey, we're going to stop having sex. What did she say about that?
She said, I want my own stick of salted butter.
And how long have you been keeping up with this experiment?
Going on almost 15 years now.
Wow. And what would you say has been the biggest advantage of going through life without sex?
It doubles your working memory.
Well, give us some examples of the type of things you were able to achieve thanks to all this increased mental capacity.
Let's see, I started the blog that you see now. I started a similarly successful cloud computing blog. And let's see, I have 2 young kids. My son is 2.5, my daughter's 4.5.
You know, Dave, I gotta be honest, some people might find it a little suspicious that you haven't had sex for 15 years and yet you have 2 small children.
What's going on there is that those people have a problem. Like, that's not how it works.
Actually, I'm pretty sure that is how it works. That's one of the reasons people have sex, to have kids.
I know some people who do it every night because they sleep that much better, but I have other stuff I do for sleep too that's a variety of supplements, herbs, and even electronic or auditory things.
Yeah, but 15 years is a long time. Are you familiar with the phrase, use it or lose it?
I look for areas of weakness, and like everything works.
Well, I'm glad this experiment is working out for you. Is this program something you would recommend to other people? Say people who just want to be healthier and feel better?
In retrospect, it was a good experiment, but it's not necessary for health.
That is exactly what I was hoping you would say. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thanks for being on the show, Dave.
It's been a pleasure. I appreciate your work.
That is Dave Asprey, the bulletproof executive. Give him a hand. Let's hope he has fun and gets a little dumber on this cruise, shall we? Another speaker this week is a returning speaker. It's Jackie Eberstein, the longtime nurse for the late Dr. Robert Atkins. And as you know, if you were here last year, I already roasted Jackie. I told the story, true story, by the way, of how Dr. Atkins hired her after she called him a quack. And I checked with Jackie before dinner. She has not called anyone else a quack recently, so nothing to say except welcome back, Jackie. Give her a hand. Another dietitian, another speaker you will welcome this week is dietitian Cassie Badger. Dietitian Cassie, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I think most of you are familiar with dietitian Cassie as Jimmy Moore's co-host on Low-Carb Conversations with Jimmy Moore and Friends. You may or may not know that Cassie is a dietitian. She works at a hospital in Minnesota where she helps people become leaner and healthier and fitter by telling them to ignore the USDA's dietary recommendations. And I think thanks to that advice, someday soon we'll know her as an unemployed dietitian. I wonder what that would even look like. Cassie was also, like Diane Sanfilippo, a very athletic young lady, also captain of the gymnastics team. I talked to people who knew her back then to find out what she was like, and they all talk about her energy, her enthusiasm, and her almost crazy willingness to take risks. For example, one time before a gymnastics meet, Cassie decided to warm up by jumping a rail and hurtling down a long flight of stairs, which wouldn't normally be too crazy, except she was driving at the time, with her teammates in the car. Well, this about scared the heck out of her teammates, especially when they almost collided with Dr. Workman driving up the stairs. But everyone survived, and Cassie went on to become a dietitian. Now, she told me she enjoys being a dietitian most of the time. She does have one recurring problem. Sometimes guys will book appointments with her pretending they want dietary advice, when in fact, they just want to hit on her. And as she told me, sometimes she's a little slow to pick up on that, even when they hint around by giving her suggestive-looking snacks. Well, she tried scaring them off with an all-natural paleo weapon. When that didn't work, she went a little more industrial. But not everyone approved. So now when guys hit on her, she tries scaring them off by telling them she's going to be featured on an upcoming episode of Doomsday Preppers because she believes the world is going to undergo a complete polar shift, and she spends all her time practicing. Now, when some people meet Cassie, they come away with the first impression that she's the rigid, inflexible type who doesn't know how to just kick back and relax. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not true, and I have evidence. Here's a picture of Cassie relaxing in the park. Here she is relaxing at the mall. Sometimes she says to heck with the diet, relaxes with a good pizza. And here Cassie's doing, I actually have no idea what she's doing there. But if those guys are hitting on her, she might be playing dead. That's dietitian Cassie, give her a hand. Another speaker I'm looking forward to meeting this week, Dr. Dwight Lundell. Give it up for Dr. Lundell. If that name sounds familiar, it's probably because of an article he wrote that went completely viral in the low-carb paleo worlds. I must have had 50 readers send me a link to this. Do you remember this? If you haven't seen it, let me just give you a couple of brief excerpts. The only accepted therapy was prescribing medications to lower cholesterol on a diet that severely restricted fat intake. These recommendations are no longer scientifically or morally defensible. Despite the fact that 25% of the population takes expensive statin medications, and despite the fact that we have reduced the fat content of our diets, more Americans will die this year of heart disease than ever before. Forget the science that has been drummed into your head for decades. Mainstream medicine made a terrible mistake when it advised people to avoid saturated fat in favor of foods high in omega-6 fats. I think we all agree with this, don't we? So what do we have here? We have a prominent heart surgeon saying the standard advice is not working. As he has pointed out many times, you can just ask these guys, they did everything they were told. He goes on to tell us that we can avoid heart disease without drugs, medical devices, or low-fat diets. In fact, we can avoid heart disease by embracing the fatty foods we already love. So, what do you suppose happens to a doctor who shares this news with the American public? I think you know what happens. He ends up on Quack Watch. I had to get Jackie at least once. Now, I have to admit, I was not familiar with Quack Watch before I heard the name, thought maybe it was a site for duck hunters, but nope. Quack Watch is a site that is dedicated to warning the American public about doctors who engage in practices that other doctors consider dangerous or weird. Things like saving lives without drugs or surgery, and teaching people to be healthy so they don't need doctors. Now, naturally, Dr. Lundell was not happy about being on Quack Watch. They did, however, raise one legitimate concern, which kind of surprised me, so I asked him about that when I had him on my podcast show.
Welcome back to the
Fathead
show with
MD.
What's up, y'all? And my guest today is Dr. Dwight Lundell. Dr. Lundell is a cardiologist who recently ended up being featured on Quack Watch. So, Dr. Lundell, I want to get right to this. How does it make you feel when you're publicly identified as a quack by Quack Watch?
First of all, Quack Watch has got its own set of critics, and I think they deserve them.
Well, I didn't think you would agree with them, but what I'm asking is, how did it feel to be labeled as a quack?
Nobody likes to be criticized.
No, of course not, but you're still not answering my question. What I want to know is, when you're labeled as a quack in public by an organization like Quack Watch, what does that do to you? How does that make you feel?
You get sick. You get what's called dumping.
I see.
And that's probably the best scientific explanation.
Well, anyone who's familiar with your record knows you were a very successful surgeon, so nobody can deny that. But the issue that Quack Watch raised that kind of surprised me was your academic record, or should I say, lack thereof. So I'm just going to come out and ask you, did you become a surgeon without finishing college?
You know the answer.
Well, in fact, I do. I did some investigating, and apparently that's true.
That's correct. And
well, how the heck do you become a surgeon without finishing school? I mean, what, did you teach yourself surgery by dissecting animals in your garage?
Oh, that's correct. And, I dove into that. It was new, it was exciting, and it worked.
But then you went out and opened a surgical practice without finishing school.
I'll admit I made mistakes in that process. I'll admit that
Look, I'm all in favor of self-education. I'm a self-taught computer programmer, but this is a little different, don't you think? Do you honestly believe that someone who teaches himself to be a surgeon at home learns as much as someone who goes to school?
To get in those little arguments to me is silly and counterproductive.
Just humor me for the sake of argument. Do you believe the training in medical school is better than the training that you can give yourself at home? Yes or no?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. I think it's not better.
Well, now that you mention it, I can think of a lot of people who have gone to doctors who did go to medical school and got some pretty bad treatments or pretty bad advice.
To come to the defense of doctors, they're doing what they were taught to do.
Yeah, but I'm surprised more doctors haven't figured out on their own that what they're doing isn't working. I mean, aren't there some sort of mental qualifications to get into medical school?
That's correct. You have to be blind or stupid.
So what's your theory here? Do you think maybe you saved more lives because you taught yourself to be a doctor?
That's correct, and we shouldn't be punished for doing the very thing that's going to lead us to survival.
Well, I actually have to agree with you on that. Okay, Dr. Lundell, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and we'll all keep speaking truth because truth shall set you free.
That's Dr. Lundell, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up for him. And so I don't give anyone the wrong idea. Dr. Lundell did go to medical school. He just somehow got in without graduating college. I don't know how it works, but he did. Our next speaker is someone who, if there is anyone, does not need an introduction to this audience. It's the next speaker. It's Rob Bubba Wolf. Give it up for him. Now, you all know Rob as a podcaster, as a blogger, a speaker, a trainer, and the best-selling author of The Paleo Solution. And I think most of you know the public Rob Wolf story. You know how he was a vegetarian, he got sick and weak, people in his family were sick, so he went out, he did all this research, he discovered paleo, turned everything around, blah, blah, blah. That's the public Rob Wolf story. There's also a private Rob Wolf story you may not know. And that story begins with Rob's answer to a question I ask everyone I'm going to roast. Here was Rob's answer. Now, I was flattered. Rob thought I could interpret that answer. But in fact, I had to look it up. Here's what it means. Well, it turns out Rob's exothermic reaction not only blew up some expensive lab equipment, it left him with a severely disfigured face. And I have the only photo he didn't destroy. So Rob took his high school graduation photo to a plastic surgeon who looked at it and said, "Let's be honest, kid, you weren't much to look at anyway. As long as I'm doing surgery, you can have any face you want. Just pick one." So Rob got thinking about it and said to himself, now what's the first face almost every little girl in the world develops a crush on? Well, that's an obvious answer. So he chose that face. That solved the issue with the face, but Rob's a smart guy. He realized there's no point in putting a handsome face on top of a twinky little girly man body. That one's for Jimmy. So he kept researching and experimenting and eventually realized that a paleo diet combined with paleo exercise could turn him into the fine physical specimen he is today. Now at this point, Rob realized with all the knowledge he had gained, there were some interesting possibilities open to him. He could teach people how to eat real food and avoid the diseases of civilization, or teach people how to lose weight and become stronger and fitter, or score big time with the ladies. Well, Rob's a guy, so he chose number 3. Now, at first, he tried hanging around gyms and using his strength and agility to convince the ladies that he is the real Spider-Man. When that didn't work, he tried advertising himself as a modern caveman looking for a modern cave woman. But the ones who replied weren't exactly what he was looking for. So eventually, Rob decided to go for the strategy that has been mastered by some of the most famous chick magnets in history, namely, becoming a best-selling author. That is how Rob became the Rob Wolf you know today. And as you can see, his strategy worked. In fact, it worked so well, Rob is already planning his next best-selling book. Now, in addition to everything else he's done, last year Rob was in a very enjoyable made-for-TV documentary called I, Caveman. Clap if you saw that. The rest of you want to check that out. It's really fun. A group of modern-day people have to go out in the wilderness for a month and live like cavemen. And it was hosted by my old buddy, Morgan Spurlock, who started out by setting up these rules he never followed, like, I will kill 3 meals per day. I will eat every animal in the forest at least once. I'll only eat an entire antelope if they ask me. Well, it turned out getting food in the wild was a lot tougher than they expected, and after a couple of weeks, these people are starving. Until they went hunting with a primitive weapon called an atlatl. It's like a whippy spear thing. And guess who was the one person to bring down an elk with one of these things and feed the entire tribe? Rob Wolf, of course. Yeah, you can clap. And I was happy Rob brought down an elk, even though I was secretly hoping he'd spear the jackass. That's Rob Wolf. Give him a hand. Our next speaker this week, someone I'm also looking forward to finally getting to know in person, the author of The Smarter Science of Slim. It's Jonathan Baylor. Give it up for him. If you have not read The Smarter Science of Slim, I would urge you to do so. It is full of information, it's well written, it's easy to read, and I think Jonathan does the best job I have ever read of just shredding the calories in, calories out theory. In fact, he has a motto for his podcast I love. Oh, that's it. That's his motto. So I've decided when I get home from the cruise, I'm going to combine Jonathan's advice with Dave Asprey's advice and come up with my own program I call The Smarter Science of Being Bulletproof. Here's how it works. Every day I'm going to get up, mix a pound of butter with a pot of coffee, drink that, spend the day not having sex, get smarter, go out for a big dinner, go home and take a nap. If I can discipline myself to do that every day, I will be awesome. Well, Jonathan's been interested in health and fitness pretty much his entire life. In fact, when he was a boy, he was obsessed with WWF wrestling, and his goal was to grow up and become the next Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Well, I think we know what happens to most childhood dreams. Early in his wrestling career, Jonathan lost a crucial wrestling match to Marvin "The Bunny" Perkins, and decided he would write about health and fitness. Now, I've gotten to know Jonathan a bit in the last year. I've learned some interesting things about him. For example, he shaves every part of his body except his eyebrows. Here's Jonathan getting into the shower. And here's when he learned the hard way you should never use a dull razor. And I thought maybe Jonathan started shaving his body because of the wrestling thing. No, turns out he's just a really hairy guy, and he started shaving after he went swimming at the beach one time and got mistaken for some kind of hairy sea monster, which led to an unfortunate harpooning incident. Jonathan also informed me he is one of these super organized guys who schedules his day to the minute, including, and I am quoting Jonathan here, private happy time with the wife. Jonathan happens to be a brilliant guy. He's also a very friendly guy. So this week, get him to schedule you in for a little socializing. That's Jonathan Baylor. Give it up for him. Another speaker this week you'll enjoy is also a returning speaker. In fact, he's a returning speaker all the way from Sweden. Our good buddy, Dr. Andreas Seinfeld. And as you remember, I already roasted Andreas last year, so I'm not going to do it again. I just want to say, Andreas, welcome back. Congratulations to you and your lovely partner, Kristen, on the birth of your daughter. And let's not forget the proud grandparents. Give it up for Andreas, everybody. Another speaker you will enjoy this week is actually a pair of speakers. It's Jason and Mira Colton. How about a hand for them? We heard from them a little bit last year. This week we'll get to hear a lot more. As you probably remember, they kind of burst on the scene last year with this book, with the rather provocative cover there. Now, Mira used to work in public relations, so naturally they selected this cover after working with some focus groups. Here are some of the covers they rejected. Put them on the map, and then earlier this year, just a few months ago, they published another terrific book, which I reviewed on my blog and highly recommended, because this book will teach you to make better choices, more nutrient-dense choices at the grocery store. And as the Coltons point out, sometimes there's just no perfect choice available, so you need to settle for a decent choice. And I like that philosophy because it's the reason Sharima married me. Now, to understand who the Coltons are, the one thing you need to know about them is that they are one of these couples who are so meant to be together, so perfect for each other, it could almost make you sick. They are so inseparable. Their own families have now given them one name, Jamira, because they are so joined at the kidneys. If Jason drinks, Mira gets the urge to sing in public. And as she confessed to me in an email, these two have been apart for a total of 8 hours since the day they met. Yeah, I know, cute, isn't it? And to prove the point, she sent me some photos from their family albums. Here, for instance, is Jason playing hockey in college. This is Mira on the cheerleading squad. And Jason's graduation photo. Now, part of the reason they are so interested in nutrition is that Mira spent many years eating what she thought was a good diet, what everyone said was a good diet, very, very low fat, lots of grains, and yet by the time she was 30, she had developed severe osteoporosis, which she found out after undergoing an MRI. So they decided to repeat the journey of Dr. Weston A. Price and go all around the world to all the most remote parts of the world and find out what is the natural human diet, what do so-called primitive people eat. And it was a thrilling experience for them, partly because some of those diets were a little more primitive than they'd anticipated. But they survived, they learned an awful lot, they're back, and they're going to share what they know with you. Give it up for Jamila, ladies and gentlemen. Those are actually all the speakers I'm going to roast this week, but before I go, there is one other topic I want to cover. Now, most of you, I think, are familiar with me as a filmmaker, as a blogger, as a computer programmer, as a part-time stand-up comedian. What you probably don't know is that in my spare time, I also work as a private detective. And I spent a big chunk of the last year solving a mystery that came to be known as the strange case of the disappearing Jimmy Moore. Now, what made this case so strange was that it seemed like just about a year ago, everyone was talking about the strange case of the reappearing Jimmy Moore. In fact, if you asked around, the word on the street went something like this. But then suddenly, Jimmy Moore began to disappear. I knew something strange was afoot when this guy, who had previously been all over the internet, began to take long, unexplained vacations. Now and then people would swear they'd seen Jimmy Moore in public, but then swear he seemed to be disappearing before their very eyes. So I began to investigate. Now, like any good detective after the truth, I sought out the most reliable sources. where I found that literally hundreds of people were willing to share their own clues and theories about the strange case of the disappearing Jimmy Moore. Right away, some people insisted the entire case was nothing but a hoax, that the disappearing Jimmy Moore was just an illusion created in Photoshop. But I was able to dismiss that theory after comparing this picture to one I had of Jimmy and me together. So I kept investigating. Now, some people told me Jimmy Moore had disappeared in order to pursue his true lifelong ambition of becoming a lounge singer. Other people said he had disappeared so he could try his luck on the professional disc golf tour, where, as you know, the top players earn dozens of dollars in a single week. One person told me that Jimmy Moore, like the Gong Show's Chuck Barris before him, was now claiming to be a secret assassin for the CIA. There was even a rumor that he had run off with a beautiful Russian spy. Sorry, this beautiful Russian spy. And some people tried to say that Jimmy Moore had run off and joined some crazy cult. But I quickly determined that those people were freaking morons. Well, after completing my investigation, I am happy to say all of these rumors are false. In fact, Jimmy Moore began disappearing by doing what he has always done, which is to learn as much as he can about how to be leaner and healthier so he can help not just himself, but the thousands and thousands of people who follow his blogs and his podcasts. And what Jimmy found was that he needed to eat a higher proportion of fat. And that was the key to the strange case of the disappearing Jimmy Moore, which turned out not to be so strange. In fact, the only mystery here was how some people reacted to it. Ladies and gentlemen, I say the case is closed. And that's my part of the presentation. I hope you guys have a wonderful cruise. I will see you on board.